Hi student, I am Praveen Sebastian Paul. In this lecture, we are discussing the event-specific conditions during the hazards. Information about the disaster impact process can be used to identify specific segments of each community that will be affected disproportionately, that is low-income household, ethnic minorities, or specific type of businesses. While discussing, the first topic is the hazard event characteristics. The hazard impacts often are difficult to characterize because a given hazard agent may initiate a number of different threats. For example, the tropical cyclones can cause casualties and damage through wind, rain, storm surge, and inland flooding. Volcanoes can impact human settlement through ashfall, explosive eruptions, lava flows, mudflow and floods, and forest fires. However, once these distinct threats have been distinguished from each other, each can be characterized in terms of six significant characteristics. These are the speed of onset, availability of perceptual cues, the intensity, scope, duration of impact, and the probability of occurrence. The speed of onset is the availability of perceptual cues affect the amount of forewarning that affect populations will have to complete emergency response actions. In turn, these attributes determine the extent of casualty among the population and the degree of damage to structures in the affected area. A hazard's impact intensity can generally be defined in terms of physical materials involved and the energy these materials impart. The physical material involved in disaster differ in terms of their physical state like gas, liquid, or solid. In most cases, the hazard from the gas arises from its temperature or pressure. Examples include hurricane or tornado wind, which is hazardous because of overpressure that can inflict traumatic injuries directly to people. High wind also is hazardous because it can destroy structures and accelerate debris that can itself cause traumatic injuries. Alternatively, the hazard from a gas might arise from its toxicity, as is the case in some volcanic eruptions. Liquid can also be hazardous because of their toxicity, but the most common liquid hazard is water. It is hazardous to structures because of pressure it can exert and is hazardous to living things when it fills the lungs and prevent respiration. Lava is solid rock that can be liquefied by extreme heat and therefore hazardous to people and structures because of its thermal energy. Solids also can be hazardous if they take the form of particulates such as airborne volcanic ash or flood-borne mud. These are particularly significant because they can leave deposits that have impact for long duration. The scope of impact defines the number of affected social units like individuals, households, and businesses. The probability of occurrence is another important characteristic that affects the disaster impact indirectly because more probable hazards are likely to mobilize communities to engage in hazard mitigation and emergency preparedness measures to reduce their vulnerability. The second point to be discussed is the improvised disaster response. The disaster myths commonly portray disaster victims as dazed, panicked, or disorganized, but people actually respond in a general adaptive manner when disasters strike. Adaptive response is often delayed. Further delays occur because people have limited information about the situation and therefore seek confirmation of any initial indications of an emergency before initiating protective action. In addition, the vast majority of people respond in terms of their customary social units, especially their household and neighborhoods, which usually consumes time in developing social organization that can cope with the disaster's demand. Contrary to stereotype of individual selfishness, Disaster victims often devote considerable effort to protecting other persons and property. Accordingly, there is considerably convergence on the disaster impact area as those in area nearby move in to offer assistance. When existing organizations seem incapable of meeting the need of emergency response, they expand to take a new member, extend to take a new task or new organization in the emergency situation. The third one is the improvised disaster recovery. Once the situation has stabilized to the point that the imminent threat to life and property has abated, disaster stricken communities must begin the long process of disaster recovery. Immediate tasks in this process include damage assessment, debris clearance, reconstruction of infrastructure, and reconstruction of building in the residential, commercial, and industrial sectors. Improvised disaster assistance is derived primarily from resources provided by individuals and organizations within the community. The victims themselves might have financial as well as tangible assets that are undamaged by hazard impacts. Thus, even those who plan ahead of disaster recovery can find themselves without the financial resources they need. Alternatively, victims can promote their recovery by bringing in additional funds through overtime employment or by freeing up the needed fund by reducing their consumption below pre-impact levels. Friends, relatives, neighbors, and co-workers can assist recovery through financial and in-kind contributions, as can community-based organizations and local governments. In addition, the latter can also provide assistance by means of tax deductions or deferrals. So, my dear students, in this lecture we had discussed the event-specific conditions in the hazard mitigation or hazard planning. So, dear student, kindly go through this assignment question. The question is, write in detail about first one, the hazard event characteristic. Secondly, the improvised disaster response, and thirdly, improvised disaster recovery. So, dear student, in the upcoming lecture, we will discuss the disaster impacts, basically the physical impacts during the disaster. So, see you soon. Until then, goodbye, thank you, and all the best.